On the night of our 25th wedding anniversary, my husband stood up and raised his glass. He looked around at our family and friends. His mother. My sister. Our 3 grown children. He smiled and said, 25 years with the most loyal woman I have ever known. I am the luckiest man alive. Everyone clapped. Everyone smiled. I smiled too. Because I knew what was sitting in my handbag. The envelope I had spent 6 months preparing. Every bank transfer. Every hotel receipt. Every school fee payment. Every photograph. I waited until he sat back down. Until he squeezed my hand under the table. Until he whispered, "I love you, Margaret." Then I reached into my handbag. Placed the envelope in front of him. And I said, "Happy anniversary, Richard." He opened it. And the color left his face. Like water draining from a bathtub. Inside that envelope was 14 years of evidence. A forensic accountant's full report. And a divorce petition. Already filed. Already approved. With my name on everything we had ever built together. That was the last night Richard ever called himself the luckiest man alive. My name is Margaret Hartington. I am 52 years old. I grew up in Shropshire. Moved to London at 23 to teach English. I was patient. Methodical. Thorough. I noticed everything. I just chose, for a very long time, not to look. I met Richard at a dinner party. In the spring of 1999. He was 31. Confident. The kind of man who fills a room simply by walking into it. He pursued me for 4 months. Flowers delivered to the school reception. Handwritten letters on proper paper. Nobody does that anymore. We married when I was 27. Church wedding. 140 guests. My mother cried through the entire ceremony. My father shook Richard's hand and said, "You look after her." Richard said, "Always." In our 3rd year of marriage, he came to me with an idea. His own financial consultancy firm. He had the contacts. The knowledge. He just needed startup capital. £42,000. Everything I had saved over 4 years of teaching. Every single penny. I gave it to him without hesitation. Without paperwork. Without a contract. He was my husband. That was enough for me. For 3 years I worked alongside him every evening. After my teaching day ended. Accounts. Tax filings. Client correspondence. I managed the entire administration. From our kitchen table without pay. By year 5 the firm had 12 employees. And a turnover of £2 million per year. We bought a beautiful house in Richmond. 4 bedrooms. Proper garden. We had 3 children. James. Sophie. Daniel. I gave up teaching. Ran the house. Raised the children. Supported his career. Attended every client dinner smiling. Hosted Christmas parties for his firm every year. Richard never forgot our anniversary. Not once in 25 years. I thought that was love. I understand now, it was management. He was managing me. Keeping me satisfied. Keeping me from ever looking too closely. It started with a birthday card. A Tuesday morning in October. Richard had left early. I was clearing his jacket. The navy one. His favorite. I always checked the pockets before hanging it up. 20 years of habit. Tissues. A petrol receipt. Loose change. And then a small pink envelope. Children's handwriting on the front. It said, "To Daddy." I stood completely still. Richard's father had been dead 11 years. Our son Daniel was 22 years old. I opened the envelope. Inside was a crayon drawing. A man. A woman. Two small children. Standing in front of a house with a red door. The sun yellow in the corner. A dog at their feet. And written in careful child's handwriting. Happy birthday, Daddy. We love you so much. Love, Oliver and Ellie. Oliver. Ellie. I sat down on the edge of the bed. I do not know how long I sat there. My hands were completely still. The room did not move. That is the detail I remember most clearly. My hands were completely still. Something settled inside me. I can only describe as cold clarity. Not panic. Not grief. Not even anger. Just understanding. Quiet and total. I put the card back exactly as I found it. Returned it to the jacket pocket. Hung the jacket back on the chair. Went downstairs. Made a cup of tea. When Richard came home, I had his dinner ready. We talked about the children. Watched television. He kissed me goodnight. I said, "Good night, Richard." And I lay in the dark. And I began to understand. This was not a recent mistake. This was a parallel life. Carefully built. Carefully maintained. For a very long time. And I was going to find every detail of it. I spent 3 weeks learning how to find things people try to hide. I am an English teacher. Not a detective. But I am patient in a way most people underestimate. I started with his phone. I had always known his passcode. He had never changed it in 7 years. Why would he? He had never imagined I would use it. In his messages I found a contact. Saved as DW Contracts. Professional name. Nothing suspicious. The messages were not professional. Oliver's school play is on the 14th. Can you make it this time? Ellie cried again at bedtime asking for you. When are you coming? I photographed every message. 3 years of them. Then I found his secondary email account. Created 9 years earlier. Using a phone number I didn't recognize. It had saved itself to autofill on his laptop. I found it on a Sunday. While he was playing golf. 462 emails. I read every single one. Her name was Diane. 30. A legal secretary. They had met at a conference in Manchester. In 2011. 3 months after our 15th anniversary. The anniversary he had taken me to Paris for. Oliver was 12 years old. Ellie was 9. My husband had 2 children. I had never known existed. I found their address from a removal invoice. Buried in his emails. 3-bedroom house in Watford. 22 minutes from our home in Richmond. On a Saturday morning I drove to Watford. Parked across the street. Engine off. Diane came out with both children and a dog. Blonde. Attractive. Younger than me. Easy and natural and comfortable. Richard came out behind her. In the navy jacket. He was laughing at something a child had said. He looked completely unguarded. Happy in a way I had not seen in years. I watched them drive away. Then I drove home. Made lunch for my own children. Washed up. And called a forensic accountant. Her name was Carol Simmons. 26 years in financial fraud investigation. I sat in her office on a Wednesday morning. And placed everything on her desk. 3 weeks of collected evidence. Photographs. Printed emails. Bank statements I had quietly photographed. From Richard's filing cabinet. Over 4 evenings while he was away. Carol read without speaking for over an hour. Then she said. As your joint account holder, you have every legal right to request full transaction history. The bank cannot refuse. I said, I already requested it. It arrives Thursday. Carol almost smiled. When the documents arrived, she spent 2 weeks going through every figure. What she found was this. Over 14 years Richard had transferred £840,000 from our joint business account into 3 separate private accounts. He had paid the full mortgage in Watford for 11 consecutive years. School fees for both children, £42,000 per year. 2 new cars for Diane. 2 holidays every year. A kitchen renovation. A new boiler. A dog from a breeder in Kent. An entire household running parallel to ours. Every single penny from our business. The business I had started with my life savings. The business I had administered without pay for 3 years. The business that still carried my name on the original director registration documents. Because Richard had never removed me as co-director. He had simply stopped mentioning it. Assumed I had forgotten. That was his greatest mistake. Carol looked at me and said, as co-director you have full legal standing. This is not simply a divorce matter. What your husband has done constitutes financial fraud against a business of which you are director. She paused. How would you like to proceed? I said, I want everything frozen. Before he receives any notification whatsoever. I want the business assets reviewed for transfer into my sole name. And I want it all done before the 14th of December. Carol checked her calendar. 6 weeks. She said, we should not waste any more time. My solicitor was Patricia Okafor, partner at a firm in the city. 47 years old. The kind of woman who speaks quietly and makes everyone lean forward to hear her. When I laid everything on her desk, she read it all the way through, without changing her expression once. Then she looked up and said, most clients come to me with suspicions. You came to me with proof. This changes everything about what I can do for you. She explained the position. The divorce petition, straightforward. Unreasonable behavior and financial fraud. Any judge would approve it within weeks. The business directorship gave me standing to free subsidiary accounts, independent of the divorce proceedings. Before Richard received any paperwork, his access to 3 accounts would already be suspended. The forged mortgage documents Diane had required from Richard. Those were a separate criminal matter, referable to the police. Patricia looked at me and said, what outcome do you want, Margaret? I said, I want the house. I want my half of the business. I want every pound repaid in the settlement. And I want to hand him the papers myself, in front of the people who matter most to him. She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she said, the 14th of December? I said, our anniversary. She said, I will have everything ready. The 6 weeks that followed were the strangest of my life. I cooked his dinners every evening. I attended his firm's November client dinner in a red dress and heels, and smiled at every person in that room, and talked about holidays and future plans. I was perfect. Because I had decided the last gift I would ever give Richard was the performance of a lifetime. The business accounts were frozen quietly. On the 29th of November, Richard received a routine compliance letter. He responded through his accountant. He had no idea the instruction came from me. On the 13th of December, I called his mother, my sister, our 3 children, 4 close friends. I said Richard wanted a family dinner to celebrate our anniversary. Everyone came. Of course they did. The 14th of December. The restaurant was perfect. White tablecloths. Candlelight. The same corner table. Where we had celebrated our 10th anniversary. Our 15th. Our 20th. Richard arrived in his best suit. Dark navy. White shirt. Silver cufflinks. He was warm and charming all evening. Ordered wine for the table. Made his mother laugh. Complimented my sister on her haircut. He was magnificent. I will give him that. When the dessert menus arrived, he rose from his chair and tapped his glass. The table fell quiet. He looked around at every face. Let the moment settle. Then he said, 25 years ago today, I married the most loyal and patient woman I have ever known. She has never once let me down. She has supported everything I have built. She has given me 3 extraordinary children. He paused. She is without question the love of my life. And I am the luckiest man alive. He raised his glass. 14 people raised theirs. He looked at me across the table. With complete confidence. The confidence of a man who had managed his situation so carefully for so long that he genuinely believed he was untouchable. I let him look. I raised my glass. I smiled. I let him sit back down. I let him squeeze my hand under the table. I let him whisper, I love you, Margaret. Then I reached into my handbag. Placed the envelope on the table. Directly in front of him. He looked at it. Looked at me. Smiled slightly, uncertain. He said, what is this? I said, Happy anniversary, Richard. He opened it. I watched his face. He unfolded the first page. Carol's summary report. £840,000. 14 years. 3 private accounts. He turned to the second page. The address in Watford. Mortgage payment history. School fee schedule going back 12 years. The third page, photographs. Him outside the house in the navy jacket. Diane. Oliver. Ellie. A family. The color drained from his face completely. Both of his hands began to shake. Our son James said, Dad. What is it? Richard said nothing. I said. Richard has been maintaining a second family. In Watford for 14 years. 2 children. A mortgage. School fees. £840,000. Taken directly from our joint business account. The table was silent. In the way rooms go silent when something irreversible has happened. Our divorce petition was filed 3 weeks ago. And approved last Tuesday. The house transfers into my sole name this week. The forensic report has been submitted to both the civil courts and the police. Richard said, Margaret. Please. Not here. Not like this. Let me explain. I said. You stood up in front of everyone. And called me loyal. I thought this was the appropriate setting. His mother had her hand over her mouth. My sister was gripping the table. Sophie was crying quietly. James was staring at his father. Like he was looking at a stranger. I folded my napkin. Placed it beside my plate. Stood up. Picked up my handbag. Richard grabbed my hand. He said, I am sorry. Please, Margaret. Please. I looked at him one final time. I said. You told everyone I was loyal. You were right. I was loyal to everything I believed we were. I paused. I was just never loyal to the version of you that actually existed. I walked out into the cold December air. Sharp and clean. Richard lost the accounts within 3 months. The fraud conviction followed 6 months later. He lost everything the money had bought. I kept everything the years had built. The house. My business. Every penny repaid. And something I had not expected. A version of myself I had not seen. In 25 years. Quiet. Clear. Completely free. Patience is not weakness. It never was. It is simply thunder. Waiting for the right moment to arrive. Subscribe. Justice always arrives. Just never when they expect it.